episode of the Jesus Agenda. We're going to talk about how the current or the new administration is starting to shape up, the cabinet picks, what's going on in the House and the Senate. We're going to differentiate between Christian conservatism and Christian nationalism, because we touched on nationalism the last episode that we did. And then finally, we're going to talk about the new age and different things that Christians are doing. It's called syncretism, where they take a little bit of this and a little bit of that, almost like cafeteria religion, and put it into the Christian faith. As always, I am Chad Kyler. I'm joined by my co-host, Steve Mannion, and this is the Jesus Agenda, where politics, religion, and the culture come face to face with Jesus and his agenda. So right at the top of the list, we're going to talk just a little bit about the way it looks that the incoming government is shaping up, and maybe pay a little attention to some of Trump's cabinet picks that are a little more controversial in terms of the backlash that they're getting.
Like Gates, especially.
Right? Like Matt Gates, which actually I might be on board with, not such a good pick. And maybe also talk about just picks that we're really happy with, picks that we personally aren't crazy about. But then also, you know, everybody should know by now the House has been held by the Republicans. At minimum, they had the 218 that they needed. I think there were still, and I didn't check this morning, but there were still like 6 or 7 races that hadn't been officially called yet.
Which is ridiculous.
Well, of course,
how come
it's
some
ridiculous.
states can count in the first night and then the rest of you are taking like weeks?
Right. And
not sketchy at all.
And some of those were incumbent Republicans, so they're probably going to hold those seats. And then we can also talk about John Thune, who is going to be the new majority leader in the Senate. Is that good? Is that bad? And then we'll move on from there. But I want to start with just a couple. I guess we can start with Matt Gaetz, because I don't know where you're at on this. I think it's a little sketchy that he was going through this ethics process, and it's a Republican-led House, so I don't know if it was a hatchet job or not. Of course, accusations are just accusations until you can be shown, or until they can be shown to be verified and valid, right? But it does seem a little bit sketchy to me that because once he gets picked for this, he resigns, and they close the books on the ethics process. And of course, the Senate is kind of up in arms about that, because they want to know what's in the report.
Well, I mean, he's in the military, or was in the military, and he's been serving. I don't know if he had anything. I personally like him, and not that I agree with everything about him, but I think the time to go into Washington and rout them and clean, and we need somebody like him to fix the feminization of our military. What I mean by that is, I love women.
He's going to the DOJ.
I mean, DOJ, yeah, I'm sorry. And we need people to do that. So, but if there's really something so bad about him and the ethics, if it's something chargeable, it would have already been done.
Right.
It's like, I mean, if you want to do an ethics search on me, I'm a pastor right now, and I, in my previous marriage, I committed adultery sleeping with a prostitute. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, we all have, I mean, that's a little worse than most, but if you want to do that, like, we all have things in our past, right?
Yeah.
Like, are we going to, like, say he's incapable of serving? And they love pulling out the stuff about Trump. Yeah, Trump was kind of a playboy, right? In his younger days. But, like, again, I'm not looking for, like, a model of ethics to any of those positions necessarily.
Right.
I'm looking for somebody that's going to go and do the right thing for our country, and so the
DOJ needs to be cleaned up. Seriously.
And the more scared, the more mad the Democrats get about somebody, the more I like that person.
I think the thing that kind of shows a little bit of the dysfunction, though, still within the Republican Party, is the backlash that they're getting from Republicans in the Senate that are saying, hey, you know, I want to know, you know, kind of what's going on here. I am a little concerned. I get that the Senate has an advise and consent role, and they have to follow whatever their procedures are. But I don't think it could be any clearer that Trump has a mandate. And I think even, you know, the retention of the House and the flipping of the Senate back into GOP control is part of that mandate, that they're saying, voters are saying, not only do we want you to go to the White House, but we want to make sure that you have the help that you need to be able to get these things done. So I just hope that there's not going to be, you know, like this wall. Like the last time when he was in the White House for 2 years, it was hard to get his own party to work with him.
Yeah.
And I just hope they don't shoot themselves in the foot by not following through with what the voters have given them.
Yeah, it's been very clear what the voters want. So
this opportunity is insane. So Gates, he picks Gates. Gates goes in. The idea is to clean house in the DOJ. Then we've got, and you started to talk about him a little bit, I think, Pete Hegseth.
That's another one.
Another great.
They are really mad about him.
Yeah, and I don't really get that, other than he's not a general or.
Well, he's not. He isn't. Now there's more. He's not tactful. He went on one time. He's very like kind of blunt, and he said we need to go, and all these generals need to be fired who did all this this trans stuff and all. And he's very, because he's kind of like you can tell he wants to go in and scorch earth.
Oh yeah,
which is what needs to be done. And,
well, we've never had lower recruitment in the military than we have right now. Why do you think?
Yeah, I wouldn't want.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to be in a dressing room with some.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
of course not. And I agree with him, by the way. And I know that there are other places. I agree with him on another issue, which is no women in combat units. I was not happy about that when that came out. And look, I'm very egalitarian in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. I really am. As an example, not all Lutheran denominations will ordain women as pastors. I'm 100% behind it. In fact, I've encouraged young ladies that are in my church who've.
Does your group do it?
Yes, yeah. Both the North American Lutheran Church and the LCMC will. Well, LCMC doesn't actually ordain; they just recognize your ordination. NALC, North American Lutheran Church, does ordain women. In fact, my dean is a woman. So, but what I'm getting at is, So I'm very egalitarian in a lot of ways, but the reality is that there are some things that should be gender specific, much like bathrooms, right? And I think that combat roles in the military should be left to men. Yeah. Now, I haven't done enough research. I know that, for example, the Israeli military, there's a lot of parity between men and women. But I don't know that women really are involved in combat, and I haven't looked that up. I mean, I always see them with guns, but if you've ever been to Israel, they all have guns.
They're in the streets doing security.
I see a lot of security work and stuff like that. I don't know that they're like
I don't believe in the front
invading
lines.
Lebanon or something like that, right?
Because if you have the women doing the security, then you freeze up the men to go do the invasions and stuff. Yeah.
So that I'm okay with. I don't like.
I'm not going to cross a woman with a gun.
Yeah, right. That's smart. That's generally smart. I've also, just not to get too silly about it, but I remember hearing a comedian years ago who said, this was back when we were in like boots on the ground in the Middle East. He said, look, if you want to beat up these Arab countries, these Muslim countries, you just need to complete or make a complete regiment of homosexual guys and send them out there. They'll run the other direction. Yeah. But they could call it the queer brigade. Mm-hmm. But in any case, so I like Hegseth. I think he'll be good for the military. And all this stuff that he said was as a Fox newscaster. Mm-hmm. He's an entertainer. Mm-hmm. What do you expect? That's like we're trying out this little podcast thing. We're going to say things here that we would never say from the pulpit, right? Those two things I don't think necessarily cross over in terms of how are you going to do your job? Pastor Stephen, you're goofing off and you're saying stuff on this podcast. How are you going to do your job on Sunday? Well, pretty freaking easy.
Yeah, he would say something. He would be different when he's in a professional capacity.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm, I'm a big supporter of the military. I've had a number of military members in my family. So yeah, I want to see somebody go in there and work on the DOD and get it back into shape. Mm-hmm. Which I think moves us to our other so-called controversial pick, which is Tulsi Gabbard. I think the biggest complaint is she's just not hawkish enough as far as they're concerned. Mm-hmm. Which is what I like about her.
They don't like her because she left them. She's their rising star.
Sure.
And then she's. But I like Tulsi in anything.
Well, as soon as
a bit of Tulsi in my life.
as soon as your one of your presidential candidates, your front running presidential candidate, calls her a Russian asset.
Yeah,
I mean
that's their go-to for everything. They're like somebody.
But what I'm saying is, you had to figure the writing was on the wall.
Yeah.
She's not going to stick around forever if you're going to call her names.
And they're
like
still
that.
pulling that Russian stuff.
Well, of course they are.
Never learned.
Saying, well, she went to visit Moscow and she went to visit Syria and imagine that, a congressperson trying to do diplomacy.
Yeah,
I mean that doesn't seem strange to me at all. There should be more diplomacy. Mm-hmm. Maybe we would have less of a footprint in the world if more people thought like that and said, we're not going to agree with everything that Putin does. And we're not going to like the way politics are. Look, I can't control who's this guy that he whacked not too long ago, his political opponent, Negevny or whatever his name is.
Who
is Putin, his opposition.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I can't control that, and I don't really care.
No.
I really don't. I'm sorry for the Negevny family, obviously. That's terrible.
That kind of stuff happens.
But that's Russian politics. That's not, I can say, that's bad. Yeah, it is. I mean, I don't want people doing that in the United States. But I'm not going to base, I don't want our leaders to base our relationship with a foreign country on how they conduct politics in that foreign country. Yeah. If the people of Russia...
And if you visit them, it doesn't make you an asset.
It doesn't, and it also doesn't mean that you're affirming everything they do.
No.
And if the people of Russia want to get rid of Putin, they'll get rid of Putin. Mm-hmm. They've had like 2 revolutions already, right? Mm-hmm. In the span of time that we had one, they've had 2. And where they toppled a complete government. They toppled the Tsar, and then they toppled the Soviet Union.
And it isn't looking so good for Putin right now either.
Yeah, no, things are not going well.
Levitt, is that how you say her name?
Yeah, Levitt, the press secretary.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's complaining about her, though.
No, she's the youngest ever.
Youngest ever, 27 years old.
Very, very young. She was Trump's...
Just had a baby.
She was Trump's press secretary for the campaign.
Right.
I've heard her. She's super well-spoken.
Yeah.
She doesn't need a huge binder like Jean-Pierre does.
Jean-Pierre.
By the way, do you know that Jean-Pierre's 50 years old?
Are you kidding me?
I've just found that out today.
How she's like...
You gotta give her credit.
Maybe,
she looks young for her age.
No kidding.
She was born in 1974.
Wait, how old is she again?
She was born in 1974. 50.
She's 50 years old?
Yeah, she looks young for her age.
That's insane.
Jean-Pierre always had to carry in a massive...
Did you know she was 50?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
She had to carry in a massive binder. It reads everything. So it can't be worse than that. So, I mean, she's going to be good.
I'm going to have to get whatever anti-aging medicine that lady was taking.
Yeah. But she's a good... Levitt's good Twitter follow. I just started following her. She's good. Yeah. Oh, I mean, she keeps saying, I hate when people keep saying, we got to preserve our democracy because we're not a democracy. We're a republic.
Yeah, we're a republic.
She does say that.
Yeah.
So I commented to her on Twitter. I'm sure she won't even notice.
Yeah, of course not.
Because I had to say something. You know, our founding fathers specifically didn't want us to be a democracy.
So we have to save the republic.
Yeah,
we have to save the republic. And Twitter is a hot mess, man. I tried Twitter for like 2 weeks, and I was like, man, what a freaking car accident this is.
When was the last time you were on?
Oh, probably a year ago. I mean, since Elon took it over.
Yeah, but it's a lot better now.
I don't know. It just seemed like a train wreck to me. But so she's not really all that controversial, though. But then we've got the big one. The big one in the chamber is RFK Jr. He's the one they're really freaking out about. And, of course, it's another defector. And it's Democrat royalty, right? Mm-hmm. So much so that I saw an interview that his sister did. And first, I want to say something. They have the same freaking voice. Is there a genetic problem in that family? Because if you look up,
rasp too?
She has the rasp. I thought maybe he got hit in the throat or something when he was a kid.
I didn't know what caused that.
I thought, or he had cancer or something. But his sister has the same exact raspy voice. But anyway, she basically said, he's dead to me. I don't want anything to do with him. But so here's the pluses. And my wife has actually been really excited about this because we were kind of like listening to some of the stuff he was saying before he came over and endorsed Trump. Because a lot of the stuff he's saying about our food and our health is just common sense stuff, right? And so my wife's kind of excited about, the idea of him.
So is my wife.
Getting the dyes out and, all these other kinds of things. And you know, he has come out within the last week or so because a lot of the accusations have been that he's an anti-vaxxer and all that. And he says, I'm not against vaccines. I'm against the machine that's behind all of this. And he was against the COVID vaccine, but a lot of people
Well,
were.
the COVID vaccine was experimental. It wasn't right. Even, they were testing it on Americans. So that's what he had a problem with. And it was a brand new, I share his, and a lot of people did, this mRNA, which is mRNA, which has never been done before, and it was forced on and shoved in before it was even, when it was still experimental, and he had a problem with that. And I think what a lot of them, there's a lot of money in the medical, in the pharmaceutical field, and there's a lot of lobbyists and a lot of money that's behind it, and from Washington, there's a lot of, and obviously, I mean, Pfizer, right, made a lot of money on this stuff. So there's a lot of knees that are quaking. With him.
I wonder how that'll trickle down with just healthcare in general, because the whole healthcare, market or industry in this country is it's bloated. Yeah. It's
we need to repeal Obamacare for one thing.
I think that would be a good start. And I've said it before, I would love to see, and unfortunately because we live in New Yorkistan, we won't ever see it, but I would love to see more medical freedom. Like, I should be able to pay a doctor out of my pocket without insurance at all and have a reasonable cost to be that doctor's patient. I should be able to, like in Ohio, I should be able to go into a CVS here or a pharmacy here and find a minute clinic in the corner that if I just have strep throat or the flu or something like that, I can go in there and it's staffed by a doctor. I can pay $25 or whatever, get my test, get my medicine, and go home instead of clogging up the urgent care or waiting in line for hours at my doctor's office, where they have to go through, all of this red tape of insurance and payment and everything else. It could be so much easier. And honestly, if your concern is that poor people won't have healthcare, then guess what you do? You give them money. You're already giving them money. So instead of spending,
that's a misnomer, that argument, because they had healthcare anyways. That you could, before Obamacare, anyone could walk in any hospital.
Oh, of course,
and they couldn't be denied service. That was
well, you have access, but then you have the bills. But what I'm saying is just use the current model. Forget Obamacare. Use the current model of Medicaid, right?
Yeah.
We're in New York. We're spending on average. Now these are old numbers. I used to work. I didn't actually work in Medicaid, but I worked in the financial care path, so I knew a little bit about Medicaid. And we were spending like $15,000 a year on one person for Medicaid. So if you have a household of, 5, you're spending $70,000 a year on one family. So why not cut that in half, give the family a check for $25,000, once a month, and let them spend it how they want to spend it. You know what I'm saying? And how about bringing charity hospitals back? Why did charity hospitals go away? Why did all the Catholic hospitals that were based on charity, because of government regulation?
See, Chad, all you're doing is proving that you are a bigot.
I'm a bigot. I'm a bigot.
I hate the poor people.
I hate the poor. But can you be bigoted against poor people?
Why do you?
I thought that was a race thing.
See, listen, DJ, do you hear this?
It's terrible. Do you know
this guy? He just wants poor people to die on the streets.
Let me just tell you that this was one of the big changes for me, going from being a left of center liberal. We were a Democrat household. My parents were best described as Kennedy Democrats, but very pro-union, very pro working class, help the poor people, that kind of thing. When I went to work for the county, that was the beginning of my conversion. And I like how Thomas Sowell, when he was interviewed, they said, hey, you used to be a communist, you were a socialist, you've been a liberal, and now you're a conservative. What made you change? And he said, facts.
Yeah.
That's what made me change. And what happened when I went to work for the county Department of Social Services is I began to see that these programs don't work. And not only do they not work, but they tend to do the exact opposite of what they are supposed to do. And so I slowly learned that there are much more compassionate ways of dealing with this that encourage individual freedom and responsibility for what you're doing, that cost taxpayers less. So hopefully I don't know. I mean, it would be nice if RFK, some of his energy could be spent, through the Department of Health and Human Services could be spent on, maybe reforming some of that, maybe come up with a way to fund things that takes less from taxpayers and actually
I think
helps
generally
people.
he'll be good, personally.
I think so too. I don't think there's a problem there. And then so who the other controversial ones, we had Hegseth, we had Tulsi, we have RFK and Gates. That was it, right? That's the four that are
Those
most
are the controversial. Yeah. There's
So
a bunch of, like, secondary kind of ones that no one's really talking about.
So we're looking at the House, right? We're going to keep Mike Johnson as Speaker. I think he's going to be a good Trump ally. He was a Trump ally all the way through. Mike Johnson, Speaker Johnson.
Yeah, we'll see.
And but what do we think about John Thune over in the Senate? I mean, he's kind of an establishment guy.
Yeah, he's kind of a more of the same. But we'll see if he responds to the mandate.
Yeah,
that's really what's going to come down to. So I don't know. We'll see. I try not to judge somebody till everyone was. I honestly think Johnson's been a little bit of a disappointment. Everyone was talking about him being like this Christian, and he's been a little bit weak. So, I mean, who knows? Maybe Thune will surprise us the other way.
Yeah, it'd be nice.
I was hoping for Scott.
I was hoping for Scott too.
But he was third place.
Well, let's talk about that, because there's the one pick I'm not happy about is Marco Rubio. I don't like Rubio. He's too hawkish. I would prefer that he not be in the State Department. I think it's unless he's going to do the job the way Trump wants the job done, it just seems like a nod towards the establishment. Like, we're just going to keep some of the old guard in. I would have much rather seen somebody else in that position. Actually, I would have been okay with Tulsi in that position, to be honest with you. But we can skip over Rubio, and because I don't think it's official yet. But if he leaves, you've got an empty seat.
None of them are official yet.
Right, but what I mean is I don't even think it's been.
I want to point that
I don't
out.
even think it's been technically announced by Trump that he's going to pick Rubio, at least as of yesterday, I think. But if Rubio does get the nod, that leaves an open seat. Now, I think we have a problem that's going to start brewing, because people are already talking about Laura Trump being there. I would be okay with that. She's done a great job with the RNC. I mean, a lot of this victory is her strategy of getting the low propensity voters out to vote. But our boy down in Florida, he's term limited. He's only got 2 years left as governor. Mm-hmm. I would think that what he would want to do is appoint a placeholder for 2 years, like his chief of staff or something. And then when his time in the governor's office is up, he moves over to the Senate, because where else is he going to go? Mm-hmm. I mean, unless he gets tapped for vice president at the end of Trump's term, when Vance, we assume, will run, he's got nowhere else to go. He's done. Mm-hmm. So I kind of think there's going to be a fight that might brew over whether or not, I guess it depends on whether or not Trump even wants Laura to take the position. But from her interviews this week, it sounded like she's not opposed to it. Mm-hmm. So, but she'd be a great Senate pick as far as I'm concerned. So, but anyway, so Trump, speaking of Trump, he made some rounds since the election, and this last weekend, the UFC fight, Roy, I always forget his last name. Do you follow UFC?
No, but I saw where he.
How about boxing? Did you watch the Paul
it was too
exhibition?
Late for me.
Not really.
From what I hear, it was like watching a Commodore 64.
Well, here's what I'm going to say. I'm just going to make this one comment. I love boxing. I've loved boxing for a long time, but boxing has really suffered for a number of years. I mean, it's just been controversy after controversy, and there just haven't been any, like, at least on the men's side, there really haven't been any people that you think of like Oscar De La Hoya or Mike Tyson or Roy Jones Jr., these big, exciting fighters that you just can't wait to watch fight. You know?
Well, Paul sure was bragging about beating Mike Tyson.
But here's the thing.
At almost
here's
60.
the thing. Everybody knows that this was kind of like, it was a
gimmick.
It was kind of like a WWE match.
It was a gimmick
but
match.
It was a boxing match. But here's the thing. The undercard was good, especially the Serrano match, and she got robbed. And I watched the fight 2 years ago where she got basically robbed then, too. So it was like a repeat for that poor girl. And they're both good fighters is the thing. I mean, neither one of them are bad fighters. But she definitely got robbed. But now the contract is starting to come out, right? And I don't know if you've seen any of this, but Joe Rogan was talking about it on his podcast. Have you seen any of this, DJ? About so the contract was set so that Mike could not win in the first 3 rounds. If he did, he wouldn't get any money at all. And so basically, the longer Mike went, each round he got more money, and he had to get to the 7th round to get the full $20 million. And also, Paul had the right to. Paul was the promoter, so he's the fighter, but he's also the promoter, and he had the right to pick the judges. So I think you're looking at Mike, and my wife and I were like, "Look, I know he's old, but there's no way he's that docile. There's just no way. I mean, the guy, he was ripped and pumped up for 58 years old. I mean, I wish I would look like that now, let alone 58." And there were a couple of spots where I'm just envisioning his left hook coming in, and he didn't even take the shot. He just backed off. So now we know why. And it was on Rogan. It was on a couple, I think, MSM sources, mainstream media sources, and a couple other podcasts. So it was definitely a WWE exhibition match. But the one good thing about Jake Paul, as much as I can't stand him for anything else, is he has been good for the sport of boxing. And what's happening is people are starting to get excited about boxing again, and we're starting to see some better matches. And he has been promoting some good matches. I mean, that Serrano fight was great. So what's that?
I'm not excited.
Not excited about boxing. Well, anyway, Trump makes it to the UFC match, and you've got a little bit of info on that, right?
Some of you may have seen that there's a Trump dance that's gone viral, and it's his YMCA. It's been done. You've been noticed the NFL players are doing it. And the NFL said they weren't allowed to do it, I heard, but all the players started doing it. And
wait a minute. They can't do the Trump dance, but they can take a knee.
Yep.
For the flag.
And then what's the guy's name?
Unbelievable.
And then what's the UFC guy's name who just won the UFC?
It's Roy something.
Roy something or another.
I can't remember his name.
He did this dance, and then he gave Trump his belt.
Yeah.
And of course the lefties.
Yeah.
So this has gone viral on TikTok, and the lefties are losing their minds because they can't stand that it's becoming like a cultural trend to do this dance. I'm just going to play it for you. It's the YMCA, and you're going to hear it a little bit. It's going through the microphone, but it looks something like this. I'm not going to stand up, but you may have seen it. It goes like this. People go like this. That's all it is. All right. That's the whole dance, and the NFL players are doing it, and they score touchdowns.
If you're listening, you're definitely going to have to watch the YouTube video when it comes out.
So they all, and it's like all the teens are doing it. It's like, and the left can't stand it.
Yeah.
But I mentioned you, and I said we should do this as a transition. Trump is a cultural phenomenon.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, he's just something they don't even know what to do. But
and it's kind of crazy to me how much it feels like it's more widespread this time around than even 2016.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is the winning of the popular vote. And we talked about that, a couple weeks ago or last week. That
the highest popular vote numbers of any Republican.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And I think that does make a difference. There was it Levitt? I think you posted it, or somebody posted it about why the Electoral College is good. And
I did. Yeah,
and that's
Mark Levin.
Levin.
Mark Levin did a thing. Go on the Blaze and watch and listen to what he says. Short. Yeah, because we are a republic, not a democracy. If we were a democracy, it would be a popular vote election for the president. There's reasons for that,
which wouldn't be good because you'd have population areas, mass areas where the population is really high. You think L.A., New York City, Chicago. They would make all the decisions essentially for the country because that's where most people are.
Mm-hmm. It being a republic puts in a balance of power, so that you can't impulse change everything.
Well, then that way you don't have like a tyrannical majority that's not respecting the rights of the minority. But it is still nice to have the popular vote to go along with an electoral college win. Because at least we don't have to hear for the next 4 years we got to get rid of the electoral college.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I can't stand. It just bothers me so much. So last week we also talked a little bit about Christian nationalism, or maybe a better way to say that would be faux Christian nationalism, because we were looking at an article that came out from Juicy Ecumenism, which is, I think, the blog site of
Mark Tooley.
Well, yeah, but is that the Institute for Religious Democracy, right? Mark Tooley wrote the piece.
Yeah.
But I think that the Juicy Ecumenism belongs to the Institute for Religious Democracy or something like that. And he talked about sojourners and this panel that they had where, all these leftist progressive clergy are calling essentially things that are just Christian values as Christian nationalism.
Yeah.
That if you support these things in public policy.
And Christian politicians can't push Christian values.
Can't be Christian, really.
They can't say it. They have to keep their mouth shut.
They got to take their Christian hat off when they walk into the Capitol building. So that kind of has led to this discussion today. Like, what is the difference then? And we did define, I think, pretty well last week, Christian nationalism. We could sort of rehash that a little bit. But what is the difference between a nationalist movement and just Christian conservatism, which is what I think, because if me holding my biblical worldview and my traditional values is Christian nationalism, then why is it that guy down in North Carolina, he's a UCC pastor or something, he has a thing called Moral Mondays, where he comes out and pontificates, usually about some kind of left-wing thing, and he does so by sort of either pointing to Scripture or Christian faith in some way, shape, or form. Why is that not nationalism?
It's because he's not a Christian. So okay,
I got
you're allowed to do it on the other side, Chad.
Yeah, right.
Just Christians need to shut their mouths. You sent me this article by the Christian Post, but it was also in Juicy Ecumenism. It's also written by Mark Tooley, called Christian conservatism and Christian realism versus Christian nationalism. And just the one paragraph from this that I think is really what goes in line with what you just said. I think this really summarizes it. Christian nationalists are distinct from conventional, and by the way, Christian nationalist, the way we described it last week, which are people that believe that America should be legally a Christian nation and that kind of stuff.
Right.
So it says Christian nationalists are distinct from conventional Christian conservatives in several important ways. The former are typically post-liberals who want some level of explicit state-established Christianity. The latter, which means conservative Christians, have been and largely still are classical liberals, not American liberals,
libertarians, basically,
who affirm traditional American concepts of full religious liberty for all, with limited government. Right? That's the American way. Is that that's the First Amendment? Limited government. We don't want grow the government to have a state religion.
Right.
Which is what true Christian nationalists want.
Sure.
And then it says both groups want a Christian America, but the former want it by statute. The latter, which is you and me, see it as mainly a demographic, historical, and cultural reality, or at least an aspiration.
Right.
And I think that summarizes pretty well. We don't want. I don't want it instituted in law that we are hereby official, because honestly that doesn't change any hearts or anything.
No, of course not.
The gospel
of course
way,
not.
Right?
And one of the best examples of that, right, is let's look at the UK. They have a state. Well, let's talk about England specifically, because
their national church is a disaster.
Well, listen, I just saw, because I've been following. So I don't mean the UK, I mean England specifically, because Scotland's part of the UK and they have their own state church, right? But the state church of England is the Church of England, the Anglican Church, right? The head of the worldwide Anglican Communion, theoretically. And there's just been controversy over the Archbishop of Canterbury hiding a sex offender. John Smith is the guy's name, and I haven't looked too deeply into the what the guy's been convicted of or is accused of. However, as I'm reading through all of these things, I see some links to these articles about whether or not Britain is a Christian country. And of course, those who say it is are pointing to the fact, well, we have an established church, and our monarchy has to go through religious rites every time they're coronated, yada, 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 right? And I mean, if you didn't watch King Charles's coronation, you really should go back and watch it, because this is a 21st century coronation, and it's a medieval rite, or maybe not quite medieval, but definitely post-Reformation, so 1500s, 1600s. And the religiosity of it, aside from the fact that it's an Archbishop of York who's doing the service, or Canterbury, and it's a mass, it's a service of worship. There's all kinds of Christian imagery involved in that, from the fact that he's holding the globe and all these other kind of things, right? And then the other side says, well, wait a minute, we're not really a Christian country. And one of the things they point to is the abysmal membership numbers of the Church of England, which is under 1 million. Mm-hmm. There's only like 900,000 members of the Church of England.
And that's just members, not attendees.
Right.
Their churches are empty.
Yeah, their churches are even emptier than that. But so I guess that kind of makes me think of America. I mean, we've talked about this before too, if we base the notion of America as a Christian nation as something that is enshrined in our documents, or even you can't really point to like the House has a chaplain and the Senate has a chaplain. I mean, that chaplain could be an imam or a rabbi. I mean, it's always been a Christian. But why? Because over 60% of us still say we're Christians for the most part. Now, if over 60% of us were Muslim, it wouldn't be a Christian, would it? It would be a Muslim cleric.
And we can't be enshrined in law any of these religions, because
absolutely
it's put in our Constitution.
But having these things, the window dressing, is not the same as enshrining these things, right? So, but if you say church membership or church attendance is what makes a country Christian, we've never been Christian then. Because Americans have never been church-going people. We just haven't. Aside from the 50s, which was a very unique period in our history of post-World War II. And it's interesting, by the way, to see how America went one way and England went another way. Post-war, England, they doubted the church and everything they had been taught. Post-war, America got more churchy. You had all the mainline churches were full. But church attendance has always been relatively low in this country, and church membership has been about the same. So, but the number of people who say they're Christian has always been high, and the majority. And some of that's geography, but today it's not geography, right? It's just still 66 or 67% of us say that we're Christian. And so to me, that's a cultural thing, and that's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having a shared narrative that we can point to. And frankly, I think the more we lose that shared narrative, the worse we become. The more young people that I run into who are not able to at least identify the basic Christian narrative means that we're going to have more problems in the future. And I'm not saying it because I'm thinking they're going to come to church. I'm saying it because they're disassociating from the shared cultural heritage of this country. And that affects how we govern. It affects how we've governed up to this point, and it will affect how we govern into the future. Maybe all of the Hispanics, which I understand are going to be the majority by 2050, hopefully they bring with them and continue their strong faith, and maybe that will keep us so that we still have the Christian culture or the Christian character rather to the culture. Even if we have to learn another language to participate.
We would like nothing more than for the Christian moral basis and to be the primary thing in our culture, but it can't be instituted into law in terms of we are hereby a Christian nation. So,
not in terms of, and I think it's a misuse of the law, by the way, to use commands that are given in Scripture to believers as a civil law. You and I are both old enough to remember blue laws. Did they have them in Pennsylvania when you were growing up?
Yeah.
I can remember how hard it was to even get a freaking coffee after church when I was a kid. And I lived in New York. So most places, they didn't have blue laws anymore, but it still took forever for that, the practice to kind of die out, right? And I don't think that's okay. I don't think it's okay for the government to favor the church, which is what those laws were for, to favor the church by removing obstacles to attendance. Now, this comes from a guy who complains an awful lot that youth sports have sort of taken over Sunday.
And they have.
But I don't want there to be a law that says no youth sports on Sunday.
No, I don't either.
And I would much rather have the culture affect, or I'd much rather have faith affect people to where they say, we're just going to pick a different day to play sports rather than missing church. So now that's not the same as things that cross over into what some have called natural law, right? When we're talking about murder, if you and I go to the farthest island from America, who've never heard of the Bible, they know it's not okay to just kill people. They know that, there's got to be some dignity that you give to human life. So Christian conservatism is not Christian nationalism as much as the left would like us to believe that it is. Listen, if you've been enjoying the work that we've been doing, and as we get better at this, we hope to expand not just our listener base, but our reach and our topics, and get more broad with the subject matter that we touch on. But if you'd like to participate and you have a business, or you're a pastor of a church, or the head of a parachurch ministry, or maybe you have your own podcast that has some kind of Christian twist to it, and you'd like to support our podcast and sponsor an episode, you can do that for $20. You can email us at jesusagendapodcast@gmail.com and give us the copy. That's what you want us to say. Or you can give us a video, and DJ will make sure that it gets onto the YouTube video of the podcast. And we will plug your work and what you're doing, and you can help us continue to do what we're doing. The last thing we're going to talk about today is syncretism, but in a broader sense, I think we're going to talk a bit about what New Age is, or what falls under New Age, and what are some of the practices that we see Christians sort of incorporating into Christian faith that are really not Christian at all. And some that are really antithetical to Christian faith. Yeah,
I'm seeing this more and more and more in our culture, where I'll meet people who are regular Christian church attendees, and they all of a sudden start talking about you should try this crystal. It brings good energies into your house, and it'll keep evil spirits from you. I'm like, what? Like stuff like that, and it's like wait a minute, like or Christians who will all of a sudden say that they talked to a friend of theirs who is a sensitive and told them that grandma, things like that. So what that is those are just examples of syncretism.
Empath. That's what that is.
Where you take Christianity and take whether it's Eastern religions, New Age, or even Islam, people take all kinds of things and they try to marry it with Christianity because they kind of want the best of both worlds, know?
Right.
And so they kind of try to marry them together. But these things are very often things that the Bible adamantly speaks against, or had no scriptural basis whatsoever.
Yeah.
Like energies, meaning, we all have energy, and our bodies are energy.
Right. So
we're not talking.
Yeah, that's a funny thing. I've had back problems for years, but you just made me think of something. And when I was kind of running out of options, because I had this period of time where it was really, really bad, and I wasn't really a surgical candidate, so they just kept giving me medication, which, it helped, but it wasn't the cure-all. So I started looking into alternative stuff, and acupuncture was one of the first things I looked into. So I tried, 2 or 3 different acupuncturists, and again, we live in New Yorkistan, so there's a lot of licensing requirements. So you figure you're going to get a professional experience. A little did I know how tied into the New Age stuff and Buddhism and all this other kind of stuff. So, and the irony is that none of these people were Chinese or Japanese. They were all white women that were doing this job. And I'm going in and they're saging me, and I'm like, what in the heck is this? So I had given up, and I started doing a Google search for somebody who maybe was a little more clinical about it. And I found this guy in a regular place where there was a bunch of doctors, and he practiced a Japanese form of it that is not really spiritual. It's had very a medical feel. I walk in, he's got a white coat on, and and it was all about connecting. So what he would do is he'd put the acupuncture needles in, and he had like this little cable thing, like little jumper cable.
Did he make a doll of you and like stick?
No. Okay. that was on a trip to Louisiana. That was for a different reason, and it was actually a doll of you. Did you feel that?
I did.
Yeah. No. So he takes these little jumper cables and puts them on the needles, and I'm like, oh, this is more hocus pocus, And he doesn't even explain it to me, and I'm like, what are you doing? He goes, well, you have an electrical current in your body, and I'm connecting the electrical current. I'm like, okay, this is hokey. But I couldn't get it out of my head, and I freaking felt it like
well,
crazy.
That actually makes sense.
It does kind of make some physiological sense, right? So what I'm getting at is there was this really weird experience with new agey stuff.
Yeah.
Where it was overly spiritual.
New age is a fad again. It's really big.
Oh, it is. Yeah. It's huge. I mean, what was it, like the 60s and 70s? Then it died in the 80s when we all got real and had Reagan. And now it's back again.
Spiritualism, it's all with a full force. Yeah.
And, I used to have I can't say where. I cannot reveal locations. But I knew a pastor once whose wife.
He knew a pastor.
Yeah, I can't say
name chat.
I can't say names and I can't say locations, but I knew a pastor whose wife was into. Now she called it like Christian healing, but it really was just new age stuff, like the tuning fork thing, and so I said to my wife, because I brought it up a few times, I was like, that's just new age stuff, and she would always deny it. And I'm like, no, that's really what it is. So I told my wife, I said, I want you to go see her and, make an appointment,
Feel it out.
Yeah, feel it out. So my wife comes back and I go, like, what happened? She goes, well, she went like this over my body and said, you had an injury in your left shoulder, didn't you? Or whatever it was. And my wife's like, no, never had an injury there. And she goes, well, maybe you don't remember it. No, she goes, no, I would remember if I. So, and then she gave her like a potion, a tincture or whatever to take home. But I even said to the pastor, I said, how are you okay with this? This is very clearly Hindu medicine. It's very clearly mixed in with all this new age stuff. It's not Christian. I mean, if you're going to do it, do it. Just don't call it Christianity. Don't put a blanket over top of it that fools Christians into thinking that they can come here and they're getting something that's historically connected to Christianity. It's not.
Yeah, let me tell you one more example like that. There's a Christian place that claims to be Christian here in the Buffalo area. I'm not even going to say towns. I don't want to get anybody in trouble. Right. This place does
it's natural in your backyard,
healing.
Isn't it?
No, it's actually more in your backyard.
Is it really?
And this place, one of the things they do is they keep hair samples of people that are overseas, and they'll drip stuff on them, and they say that because they treat the hair, it's treating the person who's overseas.
That sounds like something in East Aurora, definitely.
Yes. And so, like, that is voodoo.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Absolutely. That's exactly what voodoo does. It gets hairs and says that they connected to the person, and so if you treat the hair, that's all. Nuts. But this is a Christian place and so
wait.
Don't say it because I don't.
No, but I don't think
I'll tell you after.
I don't think it's open anymore.
I'll tell you after what it is. But that kind of stuff.
I think we're talking about the same person.
Okay, we might be. But the thing is about all this stuff, and about you always have to look at the Word of God.
Yeah.
And is there any concept of this? Is there? And also, of course, does it violate? Because the Bible tells us not to be involved in sorcery and witchcraft and all the things it names, and you got to look at the source. And for instance, I'm not against yoga in terms of stretching and stuff like that. But whenever you start going to a clinic and they're saying now I want you to invite in and do this, I mean, it starts to become, you start to bring in the Hinduism into it.
Yeah.
Then it can be a little more dangerous because you start to bring syncretism and bring Hinduism into stretches and things that are.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that and yoga is a big thing. I get it, right? But I mean, yoga itself is a Hindu spiritual practice. But I agree with you. I mean, there's plenty of people who don't get into the spirituality of it. But every class I've seen.
Most of the classes, they do.
They do.
Yes, if you're doing it by yourself.
So I guess if you're participating, then you're participating in that.
I went to one at a gym in Pittsburgh one time, and first of all, it was really hard for me. These ladies were like in their 50s, and they made it look easy.
They were killing you.
And I was at this time, I was in the peak of my condition.
Right.
And I was in my 20s and trying to do this, but all of a sudden the lady started doing sit like this, and they were doing this, and you had to do, and she started saying all this, and she was saying these. Now I want you to feel I don't know. It was total Hinduism.
Yeah,
I was like, okay,
and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
and
I don't know how you get away from that. I mean, I don't think there's a lot of because I've even looked into the ones that advertise themselves as like Christian yoga or something like that, and they still bring some of that stuff in.
Yeah, so you have to be on guard, and you have to be careful, and you have to make sure you're grounded in the Word of God, not in other religions.
But and there are some more common ways that this is, maybe you're saying, well, I don't do yoga, my wife doesn't do yoga, whatever it is. And none of us are going to, medical quacks who are dropping tinctures on people's hairs who live somewhere else. But there are some more common ways that this comes into play, right? When's the last time you heard somebody say, the universe wanted me to have, or the universe, why is the universe fighting against me? Or it's even in our kids. I watch sometimes.
I've heard Christians say the earth wanted this for me.
Really? I never heard that. I've heard Mother Earth, that kind of stuff, which I'm like, no, that's not really, the thing.
Naturalism.
Right? And but this universe stuff is like really so common. Yeah. And I mean, I've written about it, just on Facebook, but how this is antithetical to what we understand, as Christians. And a lot of those same people who are into that kind of language, maybe they also look at astrology, which, is, that the heavenly bodies somehow have an effect on.
But yet Christianity is superstitious.
Right. I know, it's crazy. What's really funny is, that the same person that I'm talking about with the Christian, with the New Age healthcare stuff, also once told me that the gospel was written in the stars for Abraham. That's why God told Abraham that his children were going to be as numerous as the stars. And I went, what? And it was written by some guy, and it turned out that he was somehow affiliated with one of the Lutheran synods in the 1800s. And
not surprising. Excuse me.
And she goes, look, he was even a Lutheran. And I go, well, that doesn't mean anything. I mean, there are lots of Lutherans that are freaking nuts. I mean, tradition
most Methodists are nuts.
Yeah. So it's like
Methodists.
It's like,
Am I wrong, DJ?
That doesn't make it okay, and it doesn't make it something that is Christian. And that's not what that passage of Scripture means in the least bit. By the way, it has nothing to do with the gospel being written on the stars. Yeah. But so I mean, I think it's important to kind of be aware of what we're saying. I know my son, a lot of times, my younger son will come in and go, I had to quit watching that show because they kept talking about the universe. It's not an anthropomorphic deity, but
the universe does not have a consciousness.
That's kind of like it's not quite. I guess that would be pantheism or pantheism. One of the two. But the New Age movement also believes that you have sort of this deified self within yourself, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, even that Hindu or Indian, I don't know if it's some kind of Hindu language, right? Namaste. It means I recognize the God in you, like you recognize the God in me. Now, I've heard people translate
and you're opening yourself up to that God. Is the whole point of it. So he can be freed into your system. I forget. I didn't know that's the whole point behind it. Yeah.
Now, I have heard people sort of whitewash it and say, I recognize the light in you, and you recognize the light in me. But most of the information that I found was, that I recognize you're divine, and you recognize that I'm divine. And Hinduism, see, that's not a problem for Hinduism, right? Because Hinduism, they got like 1 million gods, and they're okay with it. I have a guy that I knew when I was still pastoring in North Carolina, that him and his wife was Indian. She was born in the Brahmin class, but her family was Christian.
I'm gonna look up how many gods they have.
And he was from North Carolina, and he went over there to be a missionary. And they have a very successful mission. They have an ashram, which is what they call it over there, right on the Ganges River.
They only have between 33 to 300 million gods.
Oh my God! Oh wait! Oh my gods!
Yeah. So
But she used to say that nobody has a problem with Jesus.
You were selling them short. You said 1 million.
I thought it was like 1 million.
You're it's
how can you keep track of 30 to 100?
Depending on the Hindu tradition, it can range from anywhere between 33 to over. Okay, so it can be as low as 33 to over 330 million gods.
So I have a hard enough time trying to keep the one God I believe exists.
That's like having 2 wives.
Track.
How?
Well, 2 is better than 7. That's true. 7 would be not only exhausting, but damn near impossible.
And of course, I say that because we say that because our wives are complete in themselves.
Yes, that's
so
right.
We don't need it anymore, right, DJ?
Angels.
Yes,
perfect angels. I definitely would not want an extra wife. I'll tell you that. That's just more heartache and more. I know that the early Mormons said they were getting rid of it because they wanted Utah to become a state, but I think they just finally came to their senses after like 50 years.
Yeah, that's what happened.
Yeah, Brigham Young, he had like 35 wives or something like that.
Yeah, well, a new prophet said that somebody was wrong.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah.
So, hey, this has been a good episode too, I think, and hopefully you enjoyed it. Make sure that you like our Facebook page and share this podcast. We say this every week, but we're pretty sure that Facebook suppresses most of this. So if you want to share it through your text messages or through your emails, and then hop over to YouTube and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great week and a great weekend, and get your butt to church.